Monti Ossenfort made a choice on draft night a couple months ago. That's paving the way for frustration for people now. Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Cardinals, Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner _ Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Entering my 8th year as host of the Locked On Cardinals podcast, been in sports radio since 2011. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me as we embark upon what's set to be one of the most exciting and unknown seasons in the history of the organization. You can say in the history of the organization pretty much for anything, but there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of expectations. There's a lot of unnecessary lofty expectations. And as we see the Cardinals cutting down to 53, there's some updates on players that were released that have now been brought back to the practice squad, which I'll discuss. And a couple feel-good stories. Two names that I was kind of surprised when it came down to it were actually a part of the 53-man roster. Things are going to change here and there over the next 7 or 8 days, but it was a great accomplishment by two players specifically that I'll discuss in the final segment. But I had to do this first. I don't know why people have such short memories. And I'm not, attacking anybody specifically. I'm not attacking anybody. This is not an attack. Where the Cardinals are is an absolute direct correlative to what the Cardinals decided to do on draft night. So when you look at the roster construction now, and you see the pass rush being one of the weakest it's been, you see the cornerback room being full of a bunch of younger guys, and you look at the defense as a whole, like, that's it? That's what Monti Ossenfort has done since coming over? You've got to think about it this way, in my opinion. This is how I think about it. Flash backwards. Let's rewind. Let's go back to pre-draft talk. I was in the camp for about 90% of it, 85, 90% of it, where the Cardinals needed to trade back. And they could have got 2 first-round picks this year, a first-round pick next year, maybe a player, whatever it was. And the Cardinals, if they were to have done that, would have expedited the timeline in an effort to be relevant more quickly. They could have drafted 2 pass rushers if they wanted to. They could have drafted the top corner and the top pass rusher if they wanted to. But they didn't. They drafted what they saw was as the best player in the draft, irrespective of position, of Marvin Harrison Jr. So for those who wanted Marvin Harrison Jr., and now saying, oh, this roster is not filled out enough, that was a choice by Monti Ossenfort to take the best player available at 4. They very well could have filled out this roster. And they chose to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. So if you were a Marvin Harrison Jr. person and now complaining about the roster not being filled out, now, that's not the only thing that impacted the Cardinals not filling out the defensive side of the ball, okay? I get that as well. This free agent class wasn't great. So it's not like this was the most prolific free agent class we've ever seen or anything close to it, and the Cardinals just sat on their hands. You've got to look at circumstance and situation also, and not just what happened on a piece of paper and make a decision based on that, or opinion based on that. You've got to see the big picture here. And I'm not even talking about next season. I'm talking about this season. The reason why the Cardinals are where they are is because Monti Ossenfort didn't want to overpay for one of the handful, and handful is being generous, one of the handful of defensive players who can make an impact and deserved six-figure money. He didn't want to do it. The Cardinals could have drafted Dallas Turner and, I don't know, one of the corners, maybe not the corner from Toledo, but Quinyon Mitchell. They could have. The Vikings had picks. They could have, but they didn't. And they chose Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's a good pick, and it elongates the process of rebuilding. So you can't have it both ways. What the Cardinals did through drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. and bringing in the pieces they did in free agency, whether it be Zay Jones or Jonah Williams, drafting Trey Benson, is they made the offense a strength. People forget quickly, the Cardinals did not have a strength last year. It was the run game, if you had to choose one, and really, it hit the jet stream when Kyler Murray came back. But they didn't have a strength for a large portion of last season. And thinking everything's going to be fixed after a throwaway year is Looney Tunes. So what the Cardinals did, they said, you know what? The offense is going to be the strength. And then you look at their full range of picks next year. You look at all the money they've got next year. Then you focus on the defense. And then it's not like, okay, now let's see if this works. It's like, no, this is the final product now. So would you rather have two B- sides of the ball or one A and one C- D+? Probably D+. Which is better? One A-, one D+, or two B-? B- ain't going to win you games, even if both sides of the ball are like that. So when you say the Cardinals need to fill out the defense, and if you're a Monti Ossenfort made the right move by drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. guy or gal, those don't compute. They're two sides of the magnets that don't touch. It's not a rational storyline. The Cardinals are going to be in good shape on offense because they drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. number 4 overall. And that's a good thing. He's a perfect complement to the studs they already have. He's much less of a crapshoot than drafting Jared Verse and, Dallas Turner if you wanted to go 2 edge rushers. Or Dallas Turner and Quinyon Mitchell. Or Latu and Quinyon Mitchell with those picks if they were to trade it back with Minnesota. It can't be both. And I think Cardinals fans are having like this crisis of conscience where it's like, oh God, this is good, but this is bad, but this is good, but this is bad. Relax. We know nothing. Even if the Cardinals had signed Christian Wilkins, this defense wouldn't be top 10. So before any actual game has been played, there's already a line in the sand with fans like, this is either great or this is terrible. Monti Ossenfort doesn't know what he's doing. Let me ask you a question. Are things being run better now than they were or worse? Sure, small sample size also. So I can't use the sample size as a quote-unquote crutch and then use it as a strength as well. I understand that. That's like saying, a guy who has one at bat hits a home run, and that's the only at bat they have for the year, is like, oh, that's the best hitter in baseball. And then you look at somebody who's hitting 350 with 40 home runs for a year. Yeah, but he's not hitting 1,000. I understand. It's a much smaller sample size. And I also understand in my loins that it takes more than 18 months to rewrite the history of an organization. Slow and steady. Boring, yes. Effective, usually. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. Were there any surprises? Yes, there were on the 53-man roster. There were already guys being brought back, put on practice squads today. I'll discuss that next. We'll get all caught up. I just wanted to do that. Like, everydayers, you come to me because I don't just read things. I don't just say things other people say. I don't And that's fine. Everybody's got their stuff. I don't knock anybody. Everybody's got their grind, and I respect everybody that's in the industry. But I want to make you think here. Use your noggin. See the big picture while looking at things under a microscope simultaneously. And I hope I did that this past segment. 53-man surprises next. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by the Game Time app. Game Time now has a feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Okay? On top of that, they've got so many features that separates them from the rest. Curated deals that make it easier to find the best price on great seats. The super deal, you have to check that out in the app. Seat views before you buy. If you've listened to one of these live reads, it's all I talk about, because I think that on top of the Game Time Picks, it differentiates the buying process where you can actually see what your vantage point would be before you buy the tickets. Takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Lowest price guaranteed, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, etc. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Monti Ossenfort hasn't been perfect. He's the so far so good, just like Jonathan Gannon, Nick Rawls, Drew Petzing. It's 1 year. And it was a year where you're looking all towards 2024. Okay. So I'm still seeing, same old Cardinals. It's lazy. It's lazy. It's lazy and not seeing the big picture. It's Stockholm syndrome to losing and poor me. I don't know what to tell you. It's impossible to rebuild a roster. There were 40% of the players from 2022 were retained in 2023. So you're saying 60% of this roster needs to be rebuilt in a year and a half and be ready for the playoffs? Stop. I can't help you. I disagree. Leave in the comments if you agree with me or disagree. 53-man surprises. Chris Barnes was cut. Michael Carter was cut. They're both now back on the practice squad, so that's good. Michael Carter, I was waiting to record this because I didn't want to have a conversation about it and then have it drop, and lo and behold, I had to restart. And Michael Carter's on the practice squad. Here's the thing. I don't understand why Amari DiMercato made the 53 and Michael Carter didn't. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Chris Barnes has been a backup, wizard for the Cardinals from the linebacker position. He's an Arizona Cardinal. So when he got cut, it's like, okay, so you expect him to come back, be part of the practice squad, which he is. Jonathan Gannon was interviewed today by the media, and he said, we're not done yet. There's some things in the works. And while that's obviously a Monti Ossenfort question, not a JG question, this is what I implore people to do. Expect this is the roster you're going to take into the 2024 season, which is 10 days away. 11, whatever. There's not going to be a sweeping move. And I did a segment yesterday where it's like, all right, you want to trade for Son Reddick and bring in Yannick Ngakoue? Sure, do both. Or neither. And I did preface that by saying that the chance of it happening is minuscule, but for the exercise purpose, that would move the needle enough. Plus, the Cardinals have the cheese to do it. Plus, Hassan Reddick would have to take far less money than he thinks he's going to get and hasn't gotten up until this point. But just expect this to be the roster they're rolling with. Expect the offense to be the juggernaut. Expect the defense to either surprise or struggle somewhere in between, but you'd expect it to be more on the side of struggle than surprise. Nick Rawls and Jonathan Gannon did a fantastic job last year with a faceless defense and kept these Cardinals in games more times than not. Team is better now. Losing BJ Ojolari hurts. Losing Darius Robinson, who's on the PUP list, hurts. But we saw it happen last year. So while that's no direct indicator, while that's no direct indicator on what's going to happen this season, it's a proof of concept. I don't know if you've heard me say that on this show. And again, listen, there are no real surprises. There were two that I'll be discussing next. I think the big surprise was trading Cam Thomas that I mentioned yesterday, trading to the Chiefs for a 7th-round pick that the Chiefs got from the Jets. Jonathan Gannon, I'm paraphrasing here, he pretty much said, I'm not worried when he was asked about the linebacker room. I'm not worried. I know you guys are worried. I'm not worried. I'm like, okay. I wonder if they're going to have a different role for Mac Wilson, who is on the depth chart and off ball, but maybe they're going to use him in both instances. He was a situational pass rusher when he was in New England. I don't know what they're going to do with Dennis Gard. Like, Dennis Gardeck is, first of all, consummate pro, great teammate. Everything that you've heard from him, whether it be on the field, in the locker room, charitably, great dude. He's, for fans at least, he's kind of still living from a few years ago where he had that bonkers number where he had, a handful of sacks and so many snaps. And it's like, okay, that was a long time ago. Does have the best sack celebration dance in football, though. I will give him credit for that. If Zaven Collins emerges, so when I discuss question marks, and I've prefaced it by saying these are different question marks than what they used to be. It's more when, not if, or which rookies will stand out, like how long it's going to take. With Zaven Collins, it's got kind of a negative connotation where it's like he's a question mark. He's a liability at this point if needed to make massive impact from the linebacker role. And it's just something that is unsettling when you're looking from the outside looking in, because and this is not, again, my disclaimer, these are not personal attacks on players. This is the avatar that wears the Collins jersey for the Arizona Cardinals on game day. There have been on the field very few redeeming qualities for Zaven Collins in his first handful of years in the league. And I don't think that's unfair, and I don't think that that's outlandish whatsoever. I mean, he hasn't played well. Couldn't see the field as a rookie. Was lost in the preseason, his second year. He's shown flashes. Okay, he's had a pick six. He's had a couple interceptions, fumbles, forced fumbles. But it's like the Chandler Jones effect. It's like when Chandler Jones was here, he was either sacking the quarterback and nobody could find him. So when they trade Cam Thomas, it's like they must believe in somebody. They must have something up their sleeves that we don't know about yet, or we're not, obviously not during close practice. Nobody's seeing it. Or they're just punting on the position like they did the cornerback room last year until 2025. Cardinals had 33 sacks last year. I think it was either 30th or 31st in the league. And this pass rush without B.J. Ojolari and Darius Robinson is worse than it was last year, regardless of the bolstering of bodies, veteran bodies in the interior defensive line with Nolan Nichols and Justin Jones. So when you look at the 53-man roster, there's not a whole lot of surprises because it's kind of polarizing. You got the rookies. Taywon Palmer didn't make the roster. A late-round pick wide receiver. Xavier Thomas did make the roster, which, he's been fantastic. Maybe they see something from him where it's like, he's going to be good. The Cardinals have... I kind of laugh about this because every other team seemingly has, and the Cardinals just haven't, like, what was the last? And you say Dante Stills. I know Victor Dimukeji's still here. He's kind of a preseason warrior. He flashes during the regular season. But when was the last time the Cardinals nailed a 5th-round pick? I'll wait. Like, when was the last time they nailed a 5th-round pick? Benjamin, 7th round, played, well for like 10 minutes. When has it happened? It hasn't. So I guess you could say Jalen Thompson, supplemental draft out of Washington State. That was a really, really good mid-round supplemental draft pick. Okay. So that's probably the last one, but that's also supplemental draft and not, the regular draft. If Xavier Thomas can hit, when I say everything changes, I mean the floor for this defense moves up pretty significantly because then they'll have a pass rusher they can trust until Darius Robinson comes back, depending on where they play him. So it's still a lot of question marks. But Xavier Thomas making the 53 was great. He deserves it. He's like the third best story. He's the third best story. He's the most impactful story of the preseason in a positive light. There are two other ones that are more feel-good Greg Dortch stories, and I'm going to discuss those next. Highlighting them. Locked On Cardinals. Your team. Yours every day. Cornerback Darren Hall and wide receiver Xavier Weaver both make the 53-man roster. Xavier Weaver, undrafted out of Colorado. For those who don't remember, didn't watch a lot of college football last year, Colorado specifically. He was the wide receiver 2 for University of Colorado. Travis Hunter went down, the absolute standout, who's going to be a top 5 pick next year. And you don't know if he's going to be wide receiver, or corner, or both. And Xavier Weaver took over as that wide receiver 1 role. And he played great. And the Cardinals brought him in. He seemingly is a standout, not only from wide receiver position, but he did have pretty good numbers returning punts and kicks as well. So he made the roster. Fantastic. That's fantastic. I mean, the Cardinals are rolling with a lot of wide receivers, and we'll see if he's actually active on any game days this year. But that was great to see. Oh, another one that I mentioned, Desmond Ridder is now back on the practice squad. Sorry. Here's the thing. I'm going to do one more quarterback segment sometime next week. I still think the Cardinals should add a veteran quarterback, but Desmond Ridder, practice squad quarterback as of right now. The second one, which is probably the best story, like Xavier Thomas overcoming injury, playing 6 years at Clemson, coming in and showing that quick step. Dame Parsons from Locked On NFL Draft tweeted out, he goes, that dude's got bend. He's got a quick first step, and he could really surprise some people. He tweeted that out earlier today, and I agree. His first step is quick, and sure, he's going to be playing against left and right tackles that are starter caliber and not in the preseason. But you can only see what you can see when you see what you can see when you see what you can see during the preseason. All right, 3 times is enough. Darren Hall. This is the story of the preseason. This is the Greg Dortch story of the preseason. Greg Dortch was and I guess Antonio Hamilton was a couple years ago too, before he spilled hot oil in his kitchen, just a freak injury that derailed him, that had him missing a couple games early on. Then he was kind of exposed last year when they didn't have much talent in the cornerback room. But Greg Dortch has been the star of the preseason and offseason the last 2 seasons, and then really emerged last year. We actually got a shot when Rondell Moore, was exposed to not knowing how to play football on an NFL level. Darren Hall is a Jonathan Gannon dude. He's a Nick Rallis dude. I think he led the team in tackles this preseason. He's a ball hawk. Like, that's what the Cardinals need. When I mentioned the Cardinals needing to get lucky and finding guys who fit this scheme and finding guys who can ball out in this scheme under the tutelage of Nick Rallis and Jonathan Gannon, I think they found a dog in Darren Hall. And that's what the preseason is about. So while I've maligned the preseason, and I think that it should be more joint practices than actual preseason games, even though the NFL never do because it's a moneymaker, Darren Hall would have stood out regardless. But with this necessary evil that is preseason games, he looked like an NFL player among practice squad players. And it's kind of a motif that I pepper in throughout the preseason, where it's like, you can see who's NFL talent and who isn't. It's pretty glaring. And he seems to do it, and he got rewarded. Now we'll see if, there's going to be some more movement. We'll see if he ends up on the practice squad. I don't think that he's going anywhere else besides wearing an Arizona Cardinals uniform, whether it be a practice squad or elevated on game day in 2024. I think he deserves that. And that's great. Those storylines are awesome. And it also adds texture to this defense. So while the star power is lacking on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, Budda Baker, Jalen Thompson, Kazir White is going to emerge as a star. He's going to get a contract extension after this year. Like, they found their dude in the middle. That's really it. Like, we'll see if Darius Robinson can make waves his rookie season. We'll see. But I mean, and we'll see what happens if Garrett Williams can emerge. We'll see if Max Melton can emerge, if Sean Murphy-Bunting can kind of resurrect his career here. But there ain't no star power on the defensive side of the ball as it currently sits. But that doesn't mean that Xavier Thomas and Darren Hall can't come in and play meaningful snaps and make an impact for this team and continue to move this bouncing ball in a positive direction before it, spins back and then goes back to no town. like the old regime. To keep Arizona Cardinals 2.0 alive, they're going to have to rely on players who maybe weren't set to be relied upon when week one started. And the Cardinals have a couple dudes who made the roster as of now that really wowed during the preseason and deserved their shot. Xavier Weaver, electric. Xavier Thomas, electric. Darren Hall, dog. Like an absolute perfect fit. He's an absolute perfect fit for Nick Rallis and Jonathan Gannon's defense. We'll see. It'll be interesting. And I'll tell you what. I have a feeling this year is going to be Richter scale impactful. For those that didn't grow up in California, Richter scale is what measures earthquakes. It's going to be one of the most, I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. It is going to be one of the most shattering years for this organization. Could put them completely on the map, bring them all the way back, even higher than where they were in the Bruce Arians years. Or you could be looking and saying they need a new quarterback, and you're starting from square one. Could be. And that's not a dig on Kyler Murray, by the way. Like that's just like this year is going to tell a lot about the future, because this is the first year as they reemerge back from the throwaway year that happened last year. And it's like, okay, are they adding a couple defensive pieces away from really competing, or are they further back than everybody thought? And especially in this time in the NFC West, where you're looking at the 49ers, they can't pay everybody. And if they want to pay Brock Purdy, that team is going to lose massive amounts of skill position talent. Matthew Stafford's not getting any younger. That's a very young defense. And is Geno Smith the dude? I would pick him fourth in quarterback rankings in the NFC West. This is starting to see the changing of the guard in the NFC West. And if the Cardinals can really, really take advantage of 2024 and then look to 2025 with $90+ million to spend as of now, with their draft capital and their franchise quarterback and a whole bunch of incredibly talented players on the offensive side of the ball, Cardinals could be taking the NFC West here sooner than people expect. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.